adjective you want, and this still works. At the same time, many would agree the region continues to be under-institutionalized. There is an over-politicization in the region, but certainly institutions still seem to be keeping pace with the changes of the last 2 decades. This panel will provide a high-level view of the emerging geometries of power in the Indo-Pacific, and to do that, we have with us Minister Le Drian, in charge of Foreign Affairs in Europe for France. We have Minister Maurice Payne, Foreign Affairs Minister of Australia, and we have Dr. S. Jaishankar, Minister of External Affairs for India. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining the Raisina Dialogue. We would have loved to host it, all of you. I know Minister Le Drian could make it to Delhi, so welcome to Delhi, sir. But we would have actually loved to have this trilateral take place at the Raisina arenas. But let me tell you as an aside that even as we are having this conversation now, a group of thinkers from FRS in Paris, NSC in Canberra, Carnegie India, and ORF are discussing how to put some beef and meat on this very important trilateral. And we hope to be able to give you a set of recommendations post that meeting today for you to consider as we move into the next phase of this very important trilateral. Mr. Le Drian, let me start with you. The Indo-Pacific, as I mentioned, is under-institutionalized. What, in your opinion, is the role of a plurilateral arrangement such as that between Australia, India, and France in addressing this gap?
Good afternoon to each and everyone. Hello, Maris. I'm very pleased to see you again. And hello as well to my colleague, Mr. Jaishankar, who is in the next studio. We're neighbors. It gives me great pleasure to attend the Raisina Dialogue. It is my first attendance. And I would like to say that for the first time, it is in very unusual circumstances. But I'm very pleased that we can have this discussion about the Indo-Pacific region. And to see once again our friends from India and Australia. And I'm telling you, and strongly so, because I feel very much at ease in this trial, because France, as a matter of fact, is also a territory of the Indo-Pacific region. We tend to forget about it, but we are present. 2 million inhabitants. Of course, it's not much compared to India, but we do have 2 million inhabitants in the region of Indo-Pacific. So this is yet another reason for us to play a full role. In this matter, we have a very pragmatic approach. And when we talk about setting up an inclusive area, an area of cooperation, I'm not sure we should always start by talking about some very complex matters, institutional matters. Because if we do so, we waste time and we're never sure what the outcome will be. Whereas pragmatism should lead us, concrete matters being operational, and partnerships on a number of topics. And such is the reason why we have a strategic partnership with both India and Australia with on a number of topics, common environmental goods, on security, maritime security. There are many things that we share. And we even go beyond. We also have an academic cooperation. We're doing it, the three of us together. We're doing more within this trilateral. And we keep strengthening up our cooperation. I am today in Delhi. And together with our friend, Minister Jaishankar, we are strengthening what already exists. In addition, we see each other in a more institutional format within Aurora, which is very much in charge of maritime security. We're also part of the Indian Initiative for the Ocean in the Indo-Pacific, launched by Prime Minister Modi. And there is also this initiative on illegal fishing and sustainable fishing. We are together with Australia in the fight against the financing of terrorism. So there are different networks that add to our willingness to be in these places where we can actually act. And this very much enables us to get into some concrete things without starting with the institutional architecture. And this reminds me of the history of Europe. On Sunday, this Sunday, we will be celebrating in Paris the 50 years of the European Economic Community for coal and steel. And this is on a concrete initiative that actually the European Union was based on something physical that could be identified and on which we could build. And the Indo-Pacific challenge is quite the same for us. There are different fora and the same willingness of being concrete.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Let me turn to Minister Maurice Payne. Can this new arrangement, the Minister has laid out a whole ambitious agenda for what we could be doing together, what we are already participating and partnering in. But there is always a suspicion that can plurilateral dialogue such as these move beyond talk shops and actually create tangible change on the ground. Does Australia have material objectives for this partnership? In your own assessment, what is the kind of ambition and agenda that you want this troika to imbibe?
Thank you, Samir. And can I acknowledge my friends, Dr. Jaishankar and Jean-Yves Le Drian, and apologise for not being in India myself. But it is a great pleasure to be at my third Raisina Dialogue. And I want to congratulate both the Ministry of External Affairs and the ORF on bringing the Raisina Dialogue to such an important point of international debate and engagement that we are all here, no matter what. We get here in one way or another. So, Samir and Jay, thank you very much for your shared leadership in that regard. Samir, I think Australia has a very practical approach on an association like the one we're talking about tonight. When we talk about the circumstances in which we find ourselves now, the specific example of addressing COVID-19, our focus is very much on pandemic response and recovery in all of our countries, and then also in many of the countries with which we engage and to whom we provide support. We know that we are all most definitely in this together, whether it's a focus on vaccines and vaccine distribution, whether it's an appreciation of the economic challenge that will face many, particularly developing nations across the Indo-Pacific. We have a very practical thread to the work we do together. Jean-Yves mentioned maritime safety and security, and both Australia, France and India have, I think, very sound examples of where we have been able to work together, both in the broader Indo-Pacific, Australia and France, for example, in the Pacific itself through the FRANZ arrangement, which often is brought together for urgent humanitarian response in the context of extreme weather events like cyclones and volcanic issues and so on, then we also share a focus, and I know that Prime Minister Modi and President Macron and Prime Minister Morrison have discussed these issues at length on the sustainability of the oceans that we share, the resilience that we have to those disasters I referred to, and also climate change. And then fundamentally, the value of three nations like ours and three such strong democracies like ours, having the capacity to share our views and share our responses to the pressures that are on regional multilateral institutions currently, the strategic competition that we see every day. The challenges, therefore, from both of those that go to against the rules-based order to which we have all, in different ways, signed up for so many decades now. It's a very practical approach, but it also has to be very flexible. And I think COVID-19 has driven home more than almost anything could have the need for that responsiveness, that flexibility, that preparedness to engage in an event such as this, to have an open discussion about what is possible, about what we practically do.
Samir, I'm not getting you. You're on mute. Can you hear me?
We can't hear Samir.
Yeah, I can hear you, Maurice, but I can't hear Samir. Yeah, well, tell him. I think maybe the three foreign ministers need to conduct a conversation among themselves.
Well, it's your turn, Jane, so you can. You should. Perhaps while Samir fixes his volume, his sound, Jay, you could talk about your perceptions, India's perceptions of the arrangement.
Okay, look, let me, first of all, it's lovely to see both of you, and I wish we were doing it all together in the same room. But let me actually build on the remarks which both of you have stated. I want to take it in two parts. One, why do we need plurilateralism right now? And number two, what is Indo-Pacific about? To my mind, we need plurilateralism because if you look at multilateralism, which is the highest end of it, it's not delivering the way it used to. If you look at the formal treaty-based structures, and both of you are members of security alliances, that also isn't what it used to be. The power of individual nations and bilateral relations is again weaker than it used to be. So my point is that, in a sense, there is a sort of vacuum which has emerged, where multilateralism has fallen short. Powers are not what they used to be. Bilateral delivery is not what it used to be. So it requires it requires countries which are comfortable with each other, who see merit in working with each other, and who frankly will make the world a better place by working together, come together. So I would say, well, three of us are talking today, or Maurice, you and I deal with the Quad. As a broad case, I think the world is moving towards groups of countries who are looking to work together. You can call them whatever, coalition of the enthusiastic, the convergent, the willing. Pick your region, pick your combination, but I think that's where the world is moving. Now, the question, Indo-Pacific. Why Indo-Pacific? I would argue, first of all, I think if all of you want to know what I think about the Indo-Pacific, please buy and read my book. It has all the answers in it. But for those of you who haven't done it, let me give you a short version of it. I think Indo-Pacific historically existed. It refers to a seamless world. This was historically there, because if you look at Indian or Arab economic, trading, cultural influence, all the way from ASEAN into, Vietnam up to even the east coast of China, historically. Or if you look the other way around, which is Indonesians actually going all the way to the east coast of Africa. So what actually broke up this seamlessness? Some of it was, yes, the empires of that imperial period, but a lot of it was post-Second World War politics. And the fact that we separated it as Asia, Pacific, and Indian Ocean. And I think today, because of globalization, because of rebalancing, because of multipolarity, because even the most significant power there, the United States, is willing to work with others in a way in which it wasn't earlier. We have the sort of coming together of what was an aberration, where they were actually dealt with in a very distinctly different way. So I would argue that in a way, Indo-Pacific is a sort of return to history. It reflects the more contemporary world. It is actually overcoming the Cold War, not reinforcing it. So I would very much hope that all of us who would like to run contemporary foreign policies look at it that way.
Excellent. Can I be heard now? And can I take the moderator's chair?
Yes, you can be heard but not seen, but please go ahead. Oh, yes, seen as well.
You can possibly see me as well, but Dr. Jaishankar, I actually wanted to ask you something very similar to what you've just already responded on, but maybe more sharp and more direct. You have a country which is part of the NATO. It's a P5 country. You have two speakers here who are allegedly from the Asian NATO, or that's what some people describe it as. You have, different histories, different aspirations, different journeys as peoples. How does this plurilateral arrangement, this troika, give you as the foreign minister of India the room to maneuver, the room that you seek to maneuver? You'll have to unmute yourself, sir.
Sorry, partly in preparation for this panel, I actually sat and looked at all the Quad meetings that we've attended. And Maurice and I have done 3 of them at a ministerial level. I did some of them when I was Foreign Secretary as well. So I want to give you a sense of 10 subjects which we actually discussed in the Quad in the last few years. Vaccine collaboration, higher education and student mobility, climate action, HADR, emerging technology, resilient supply chains, semiconductors, disinformation, counter-terrorism, and maritime security. Now that list will tell you, what is in our minds and what is the purpose of what we are trying to do. And when I say the Quad, I'm pretty sure that when we do our trilateral, which we couldn't do this time, we would be discussing, the three of us, something very similar. So the purpose of coming together is actually, frankly, to find ways of working for our national benefit, for our regional benefit, and for global benefit of it. So I think this idea that somehow because we come together, there is some sort of threat or messaging to others. I think people need to get over this. As you say, I see a NATO member, I see a treaty ally. They know what that means. Now, I have a very different political history. So I know what I can do and what I'm not going to do. So, and I also want to say this, look, very frankly, this kind of, using words like Asian, NATO, etc., this is a sort of mind game which people are playing. I can't have other people sort of have a veto about what I'm going to discuss, with whom I'm going to discuss, how much I'm going to contribute to the world. That's my national choice. So that kind of NATO mentality has never been India's. If it has been there in Asia before, I think it's in other countries and regions, not in mine.
Let me turn to the French minister. So, from your perspective, since you have already mentioned this impressive roster of activities in the region, how do you think we should be moving as a grouping to create real, tangible progress? Do you think it's in the area of human development, in the area of infrastructure and connectivity, or do you think this is a largely political grouping trying to come up with norms for the future?
First of all, I fully share what was said a minute ago by my friend Minister Jaishankar as to the fact that we share the same willingness to work together simply because we get along well. And not just because we share some common interests and because we share some similar concerns and because we're democracies and because we comply with the rule of law. All of that is in our common genes. But on top of it, we want to do it together. And we're doing it in a very pragmatic way. And your comment, sir, mediator, you were rather talking about the Quad, because we are certainly not into any sort of a military institution or format. Mm-hmm. However, security in the Indo-Pacific region is very important to us. Free movement and security of the movements, the security of trade, this is the reason why we share some joint initiatives in order to guarantee this security. We have some monitoring patrols with India, for example, off the coast of the Réunion Island. We also have a number of initiatives for intelligence sharing with Australia. We also launch some maritime surveillance missions in partnership with our Australian friends. So in summary, security so that the Pacific can be the Pacific. Mm-hmm. We have this willingness and it is very concrete. That being said, we also, all of us, are extremely active in supporting the rise of the blue economy, because the luck and the value of this region, if it is protected, it means that there we will still have all the ingredients of the blue economy in terms of energy resources, fishing resources, also for research purposes and innovation with some specific molecules. So in summary, we all have we share this this field of experience in common. And of course, then come the environmental challenge and necessity to have some strong renewable energy based on solar, wind power, or the sea as well. And this is part of our very concrete joint commitments, including all the ongoing reflection on decarbonate hydrogen. This is part of our joint future.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to add as well humanitarian assistance, on which we regularly work together whenever there is a disaster somewhere. And of course, the fight against pollution, and in particular plastic pollution in the maritime environment. Concrete actions. This is what unites us, the things that can be monitored as well.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let me turn to Minister Payne. I was going to ask you the question from someone who has sent it to us a few times. His question to you, Anirban Chakravarti, asks, how can we strengthen people-to-people dialogue in the Indo-Pacific? With the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023 in Australia and New Zealand, can Australia play a role in using sports as a diplomacy tool? Let me add a small subtext to his question. Do you think it's time India and Australia taught the French how to play cricket? And maybe that could be something that this plurilateral could be useful for as well. But none, this is a question to you. And a second question to both Mr. Jaishankar and to you is that can this group respond to what's happening in Myanmar? Since they are a country that's in our part of the world, is there any chance of collective action working together in responding to what's going on in Myanmar? There are two questions that have come for you, Minister Payne, so I thought I'd just pose them to you.
Thank you very much, Samir. I think the question about people-to-people links is a very important one, and it starts at the top. Actually, it starts with very, very solid, sound relationships between counterparts, such as the one that we share, the three of us, between not just us as individuals, but our countries, our officials who work together so effectively, and demonstrably show the value and importance of those relationships. For Australia, many of our people-to-people links are created through sport. Your questioner is absolutely correct, and the FIFA Women's World Cup coming to Australia and New Zealand means that France, India and Australia can all play on the same rectangular field without having to try to teach Jean-Yves about cricket. And so I think I have basic French language skills, but I'm not sure that they will extend to, as Jean-Yves knows, I'm not sure they will extend to discussing what happens when people are in and out and slips and gullies and boundaries and things like that. So I might have to settle for football. Australia has a really strong sports diplomacy program. It's an absolute passion of ours, and one which is particularly strong across the Pacific. Another shared interest between us, of course, is the pursuit of rugby. Is seeing girls, young girls particularly, thrive in non-traditional sports these days becoming traditional, but formerly non-traditional sports. And of course, we have a strong interest in cycling. I meant to say in netball as well. So I think the opportunity to maximise engagement in the region through the Women's World Cup is a very powerful one. And in fact, I'm meeting with Football Federation Australia, key to this process in Sydney next week, and also very focused on what the legacy of the Women's World Cup looks like. Mind you, I don't think it'll ever stop Jay and I being completely competitive on matters cricket, tweet by tweet, into the future. I also think that the power of shared engagement in international education is one which cannot be underestimated. The power of, or overestimated, the power of shared involvement in international education, whether it is students from Australia going out into the region and more broadly into places like France, or students from India and France with the opportunity to come to Australia. We know that it's suffered a significant hiccup because of COVID-19 and restrictions on travel and movement. But I find when I talk to students who are a part of the new Colombo plan in Australia, whose task is to go out into the region and study in the Pacific and in Southeast Asia and more broadly, that they become the most extraordinary ambassadors, both for the new Colombo plan itself, but also for Australia and for the countries in which they study. And they are links made for a lifetime, for a generation, and in fact into the future. So I would strongly support those engagements as well. COVID has restricted our capacity to build people-to-people links, but we have found virtual ways to do it, as you have here tonight, Samir, with this Rosina discussion. And we need to maximise those and make sure we make the most of them. On Myanmar, if I may just thank you. On Myanmar, this is a very challenging and very tragic situation for our friends who had been working so hard on a democratic transition in Myanmar for so long. We've been very clear from Australia's perspective to acknowledge the importance of working with ASEAN on identifying solutions in response to the military coup in Myanmar. ASEAN is key to our Indo-Pacific region. Its centrality is fundamental for Australia, and Myanmar is a key member of ASEAN. That said, though, the increase in violence and the increasing number of deaths are deeply concerning. And Australia, for one, has made some changes in relation to our development assistance program, in relation to our military-to-military engagement in particular. I do think, though, that I strongly support the bringing together of an ASEAN leaders meeting in the coming week. That will occur early next week. And I would hope that has the ability to press upon Myanmar the vital necessity for the cessation of violence, the cessation of the use of armed force against civilians, and for a very, very focused examination of the options that are put forward by many interlocutors as to ways forward for Myanmar now. But I think we all share our views of concern over what has happened in recent months.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Jaishankar, a question by Shailaja was also directed at you.
Let me follow the same order: sports, education, because Marie's brought it up, and Myanmar. Look, in sports, you never know where you'll find talent and how that talent would get organized. Because think back, when the IPL started, one of the great finds of that first IPL season was actually a Dutch fast bowler called Dirk Nannes. I don't know if you remember him, though I know Maurice is going to say he's Australian. Right. But he's actually, I think, a kind of a dual passport holder. It sounds much better when you say he's Dutch. But look at Afghanistan again. I mean, to my mind, how the Afghans have embraced the sports. And today, when you look at Rashid Khan, I mean, it's really unbelievable how far they've come. So I do see sports as an important bonding between nations. I would certainly like to see India, much as I love cricket, to get into more sports than just cricket. And I think we're doing that. I mean, you look today, badminton has been a success story. Tennis, which, by the way, I want to tell you was invented in France, was, again, a sports where we've done consistently well for some time. So I think part of our prosperity, our rise, our development, and a lot of it is something which the government itself is encouraging. We have something called Khelo India and Fit India. I mean, these are moments where we tried, even ministers tried to show that they can make, some difference out there. The education part. Today, education is at the heart of our relationship with Australia. And I'm very pleased to say it's becoming more and more important with France. And I would compliment the French because they've actually led the way in giving students some kind of ability to support themselves when they study in France. So in fact, we hold up France as an example to others in Europe saying, can't you do something similar for us? So certainly when we do our trilateral, I would like very much to discuss education as a common factor between the three of us. When it comes to Myanmar, I think all of us, certainly the democratic countries where we all have a common position in many ways, but also because we are located differently and our relationships with Myanmar are each unique. We also have a unique position. We're seized of it both bilaterally. We have a common border and we engage with all parties in Myanmar very, very intensively. I should also share with you that we are in fairly regular touch with the ASEAN in terms of what they're doing, as indeed Australia is, and possibly so is France. So it's something which, all of us will have to find ways of coming together and each sort of doing what they are good at in trying to find what is a common solution.
There is one more question for you. This is from an audience member who basically asks that Dhruv Gadhavi, that since Quad is that very large presence and formation in this region, he calls it the wind turbine. Do you believe any other grouping is going to be like wind chimes? So how do you create significant plurilateral arrangements that are not overshadowed by the Quad? I think that's the question he's trying to ask. That's for you. That's for you.
To me?
That's for you. Yeah, that's for you.
Look, I'm not talking myself down, but I do want to say that if there's any arrangement which is actually a wind turbine, as you called it, it is the ASEAN, and it is the ASEAN-related platforms. Because if you look at the East Asia Summit, it's a remarkable platform. Where much of Asia, the US, Canada, Russia, Europe, everybody is out there. In fact, if in terms of the centrality of any body or platform or a set of mechanisms, I think there's no question that ASEAN is and ASEAN will be central to what is happening in the broader region. I wouldn't confuse it with the Quad. That's really comparing apples and oranges. I think Quad has a different purpose because you have 4 countries very comfortable with each other, who agree on a lot of issues, who would like to work together on a lot of issues, some of which I spelled out for you. But again, if I can switch back, going back to the East Asia Summit and ASEAN, we have, tabled Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative there. And I was very pleased that Minister Le Drian confirmed to us that France has agreed to lead the maritime resources pillar of it. Earlier, Australia had told us that they would lead the maritime ecology pillar. Japan has agreed to lead the trade and connectivity pillar. So, these are all today examples of how international relations are being conducted differently, with, as I say, with softer hands and greater imagination. I think that's really the future of diplomacy as I look at it.
May I say something, please?
Minister Le Drian, please, I'm coming to you. You can certainly intervene, but there's a question for you also from a gentleman from the audience, Rishi, and he says that there is another Quad called the Southern Quad, which is a cooperation between USA, Australia, France, and New Zealand. And what is the status of that constellation, what is happening there for the viewers in India? Has that made some progress? And of course, you can please intervene in what you wanted to say in terms of what the Minister Jaishankar just shared.
First of all, I meant to react on Myanmar. Simply to say once again that, first of all, we talk a great deal about it in Europe. There's a lot of solidarity with Mrs. Aung San Suu Kyi. A lot of solidarity with the government that was elected, properly elected, and a lot of protests against the behavior of the junta that came out of the coup and that are continuing with their violent action in a more and more serious manner. That being said, Europe did take measures. The 27 members of the EU adopted sanctions against the main authorities of the junta. They are prohibited from traveling to Europe. The goods they may have in Europe are also frozen, or any assets they may have. And we also decided of a number of sanctions against companies, businesses that only operate for the purpose, for the benefit of the military, of those members of the military. And lastly, we put an end to assistance to the government. I believe this is a serious attack against democracy in the southeast of Asia, and we need to maintain the international pressure. On a different matter, Maryse and Minister Jaishankar, you talked about sports and education. We enjoy a long-standing relationship with Australia on cycling. At some point in time, Australians kept winning everything in France. And Cadel Evans is very popular here. As to the issues of training and education, it is a priority for the three of us. Our Indian colleague mentioned our willingness to put in place in France some training sessions for Indian students, training sessions so that they can learn French to begin with. And our target is to have 20,000 Indian students in France, because that contributes to cultural exchanges and also to building some sustainable bonds between the two countries, with the reciprocity, of course. And with Australia, at the time when we began, it was very much regarding education as well, including Sydney, but also Adelaide. I did hear a question about the Quad, but I'm not sure I got it properly.
It's okay. We are running out of time. We have 2 minutes left. So what I'm going to tell the poser of the question is that questions are guaranteed, answers are not. We will certainly try to attempt it next time. But final thoughts from Minister Payne and then Minister Jaishankar, and we will wrap up after that. So final thoughts from you, Madam Minister.
Thank you very much, Samir, and thank you both colleagues for the opportunity to meet virtually like this and to engage in this very important Resina Dialogue 2021. It's fair to say that I have spent a lot of late hours in the night and the early mornings here in Australia watching both Le Tour de France and the IPL cricket. So I can acknowledge both of those as a focus for us here in Australia. I think, Samir, I would say that the values that this discussion has reinforced that Australia, like India and like France, wants an open, inclusive, resilient Indo-Pacific region to which we are strong and constructive contributors. It has been a really important message. From Australia's approach, central to that is the growing and sustaining of a network of partnerships, whether they're bilateral or regional, multilateral or plurilateral, and in small and flexible groupings like this particular Australia-India-France relationship. I think it's important that we acknowledge that there's newer and flexible partnerships can actively complement, not compete with, existing institutions and alliances and relationships. In fact, they enhance relationships, in my view. So working together, we have that opportunity to coordinate our efforts to identify practical solutions to the challenges that we face, both the urgent and immediate ones and many of the longer and more strategic ones. So thank you for the invitation from the Resina Dialogue. I absolutely promise to make every effort to attend in person on future occasions and look forward very much to the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Can I final word from the Indian External Affairs Minister on this panel, sir?
Well, I would also like to thank my two colleagues. I think this was a good conversation, and I would, you asked me what is the way to go forward. I think one way to go forward is for us to hold our trilateral in person quickly. I'm looking forward to that. But I do want to say this. Look, Indo-Pacific is a clear message that India will not be constrained between the Malacca Straits and the Gulf of Aden. That our interests, our influence, our activities today go way beyond. When we look at a larger canvas, we see Australia there, we see France there. France is very much a part of this canvas, historically, culturally, physically. There are a range of activities and projects on which we can all work together. Perhaps the most important quality we bring to this is really that intuitive comfort that we have with each other as societies, as polities, as economies. So I'm very, very confident that what you have seen in the panel today will be seen in diplomacy tomorrow, which is the three countries working together. And I would very much like to see that sort of grow in the years to come, and I look forward to working with my two colleagues in that regard.
I think that's a great note to end this discussion on. Words into action, and three countries determined to put together a partnership for the future that responds to the needs of the people and puts together a new basis for cooperation in the age of the Indo-Pacific and certainly in the decades ahead. So let me thank the ministers for joining us digitally. Let me apologize to the audience for disappearing on you for a few moments. This is the perils of the digital age as well, but it all ended well. And thank you so much again, ministers, for joining us. I wish you all the best, and I wish the French minister a very successful stay in Delhi. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for more conversations from the Resina Dialogue.